Alright, so this is a translation and discussion of Pliny's letter 727, in which we are going to finish it up, chapters 13 all the way through the end, and the last of the three ghost stories. So, remember previously in the chapter, a fellow was sleeping with his brother in the bed, and he thought that he saw some guy come at him with some scissors, and the next morning they found hair all around lying. And so now we have the next part of the story as told to us. A slight or narrow or small medium of time passes. Or we can understand this as the duration of time and extent of space is always expressed in the accusative case, but in any rate, just understand that it is a small medium of time. In other words, not 6 months later, but like a week later, 2 weeks later, something along the lines. And again, Ursus, another thing. Think of this as another incident, another ghost encounter, similar to the previous one, made faith. In other words, to say it made faith, it made a believer out of me, Pliny is implying. A puer. Now literally this translates as a boy. However, in the context, puer is often what Romans would refer to slaves as, and it would not matter if the slave would be a young slave or an old slave. And just as a quick aside, the reason why we as a society often say, hey man, what's going on, man, and so forth and so on, it was actually begun in the early days of the civil rights movement, in which you have young black men intentionally calling each other men because it was the habit of those that were in Jim Crow South and racist whites that would refer to black men, regardless of how old, as boy. It is a demeaning term, as it were. And so they would intentionally refer to each other and call each other man, as it happens. You can read about this in Letter from Birmingham Jail, in which obviously MLK laments the fact that these stately grandfatherly types of African-American men are just dismissed and condescendingly called boy. So here, it's the same concept that slaves, regardless, are often referred to as boy. So we're going to translate it as slave. So a slave, having been mixed, a perfect passive participle, in a pedagogium. A pedagogium is a boarding school to where young slaves often would be sent in order to be educated. He was sleeping with more. So remember that the first instance involved just one person sleeping with another, two brothers in the bed. But here, they are not in one bed, but in one area, as it were, of the dormitory, most likely. So they were sleeping with more, the comparative of multis. And so, they came through the windows. Venia venire, veni ventus. And who are the they? Two. It doesn't say two people. It doesn't say two men. It doesn't say two ghosts. Just two entities of some sort. In white tunicas came through the windows. Ita, in such a way, he says. This aside is essentially telling you that Pliny did not see it, and others did not see it. Obviously, they were sleeping, as it were. But the fellow for whom the puer, the young slave, that this happened, he's the one that's offering up the proof. And so, in some ways, Pliny is distancing himself ever so slightly from the veracity or the truthfulness of this story. So the two ones in white tunicas came through the windows, in such a way, he says, where, and they, and this is your same verb, tondeo, tondere, which means to shave. And they shaved the one reclining, again we see a present active participle that's being substantized, kubo, kubare means to bed down, the one bedding down. And they then, the two, receded, went back, qua, the place in which, or just simply where, they had come, which obviously the qua is referring to the same entity as those windows. This is accusative, so I'm going to keep looking for my nominative. This is accusative, so I'm looking for my nominative, and there it is again. Day. Again, you have to understand, in the pre-electrical world, nighttime was truly dark. And so therefore, the daylight, I'm going to translate the dies as, shows or reveals, ostendere, so we get the English word ostensibly. This guy also having been shaved, and the daylight shows hairs having been scattered. Spargo, spargere, sparsi, sparsus, having been scattered all around. And so now this is the second person and the second incident of the ghosts apparently at night coming in and shaving the hair. He then continues in chapter 14. Nothing notable having followed. Again, this is the perfect passive looking participle from sequor, sequi, secutusum. If you wanted to convert it into a verb, you would imply an est, and all of a sudden now you have a perfect passive looking verb. Nothing followed. Or you can leave out the est and just simply say nothing notable having followed, except nisi. By chance, forte here is not strong, but it is the noun fors fortis, where of course you get the word fortune, as in fortune, fortunate, fortune teller, and so forth and so on. Except by chance, the fact that, quote, very often can be translated as the fact that instead of just because or which. Non fui res. I was not an accused person. I was not a defendant. Fui could also be the perfect I have not been. And so, I about to be. So apparently what Pliny is telling you here is that he was on the list of people to be accused and prosecuted. And he would have been, it says, I was not, I about to be, if Domitian had lived. So what we have here is the protasis, which is the if clause of a past contrary to fact. I know because when I look at weak cisse, everything to the left of it is a perfect infinitive with an ending on it making a pluperfect subjunctive. And pluperfect subjunctives are what you use when you have a past contrary to fact conditional. And so, if Domitian had lived for a longer time, Domitian, under whom these things happened. So, to kind of flesh this out, essentially Domitian, who is an emperor, one of the 3 Flavian emperors, the first Flavian emperor beginning with Vespasian, who is going to rule from 69 to 79, then you have Titus, which is going to be from 79 to 81, and then Domitian from 81 until his death in 96, and so therefore it dates the events of this letter as his death occurred in 96. A horrible emperor, and one who indeed was incredibly unfair, incredibly autocratic, and as a matter of fact, the last days of his reign was known as Domitian's Reign of Terror, because essentially he had many people accused of treason. You could think of it like a hit list, to where when they are executed, their money comes to Domitian and the state, not to their family, because obviously as traitors, their families are going to be punished as well. And so what Pliny is telling you is that, by chance, he would have been an accused traitor and would have been on that hit list, but Domitian died right in time. So again, the fact that by chance I have not been a defendant, I have not been an accused traitor, I about to be so, if Domitian had lived for a longer time, under whom, Domitian, these things happened. For a little book. Now the libellus here is going to be literally little book, but it's more so as, you should understand it as the charges brought against one who is a traitor. So we're going to translate libellus as an accusation. So, for an accusation having been given by Carus concerning me, this is one of the administrators, Carus, under Domitian, who was instrumental in accusing many of those of the senatorial class of treason, and thus, obviously, leading to their execution. You can think of him as being somewhat of Domitian's henchman, and a high-ranking henchman, who is going to be compiling these lists of senators that are going to be accused, and therefore, like I said, ultimately executed. The accusation having been given by Carus concerning me, it has been found in Scrinio Eos, in his, referring to Domitian's, and then a scrinium is like a little cylindrical box, but you can more so think of it maybe as a kind of a to-do box. All the stuff that is in that box, Domitian checks it every so often and says, okay, I've got to take care of that, okay, I've got to take care of that, okay, I've got to take care of that. And so that is where this accusation against Pliny, this libellus, then has been found, was found. Again, when you pair a present form of the verb to be with a perfect passive participle, it makes a perfect passive verb. And so therefore, this accusation, having been given, was found in his, Domitian's, to-do list box. Ex quo conjectari potest, out of which it is able to be conjectured, it is able to be inferred, it is able that the dots be connected, since it is of the custom. What we have with Morris, which of course comes from the noun mos Morris, which gives us the English term mores. So the nominative is mos, and then you have Morris. It is obviously where we get the word morals, and mores is the term we use in English that means the customs of a people or a culture. And so since it is of the custom for those having been charged, for those defendants, that reus that we see there, submittere capellum. Now we all know that mittere means to send, but it can also mean to let go. And so it is the custom of, or the custom for the accused to let go their hair, i.e. to let their hair grow long. And so what Pliny is doing here is he is taking these ghost stories as an omen that he had barely escaped this horrible fate of accusation and then ultimately execution. And indeed, to let their hair go long. It is able to be conjectured that. So here is going to be the verb that is introducing the indirect statement with an accusative subject that we see right there, and our infinitive verb that is right there. And so what can be conjectured? That the hair of my guys, my two enslaved people, having been cut, that hair has been. It's an infinitive, but we don't translate it like an infinitive because it's not an infinitive, it has a subject. Has been a sign of this danger. The danger which was overhanging, but that danger, Brigley, having been repelled. And so, he's indicating that the cut hair is the omen, or it is the sign of this imminent danger that Pliny didn't even know that he was in, except for after the fact, when that accusation was found in Domitian's to-do box, as it were. So let's go ahead and finish it up on the next page to the end of the letter. Now remember, the origin of this letter is that Pliny is writing Sura, asking Sura, do you believe in ghosts? I respect your opinion, you're an educated man, let me know what you think, and here are these three examples for you to consider. And so, pro inde, therefore, thenceforth, if you would like, it would be the same if it were just inde, I ask. And what is missing here is an ut, making this with a subjunctive verb, intendo intendere, the indirect command. I ask that you stretch your erudition. You use your knowledge. You use your learning, as it were. And so I ask you that you stretch your erudition. The situation is worthy. The situation which you could, would, might, may, can. It is a subjunctive, imperfect subjunctive, because everything to the left, obviously, is a infinitive, present infinitive, and then by adding the s that is here, making it imperfect subjunctive. So it is a worthy thing which you should consider for a long time and a lot. He's telling this guy, I want you to give this a lot of thought. Don't just dismiss it out of hand or accept it out of hand. I really want you to mull it over. And why? Not even am I unworthy. As in, I'm worthy for you to communicate with about this, to discuss this. The situation is a worthy one to consider. I'm a worthy person that you respond with your thoughts on the matter. And so he goes on to say again, not even am I unworthy, I, to whom you make an abundance of your knowledge. I am worthy to receive your thoughts. Again, I want you to give this a lot of thought, Sura. I want you to obviously weigh in on this. Don't just merely dismiss it. It is permitted, or colloquially, or idiomatically, you could translate it although, but I'm going to go with it is permitted. Now remember that the it always gets exclamation points because when you have an impersonal verb like licet, your subject is going to be an action. Now that action could be expressed via an infinitive or what we have here, a subjunctive verb. Disputo disputare, or disputo disputare, meaning to disputate. To disputate means to mull over. It means to argue over. It means to give great consideration or just simply think deeply about. And so it is permitted that you think deeply, utram in partem, utramque, into each part. These two parts are A, yeah, ghosts are real, and these stories are real. Or B, no, ghosts ain't real, and these stories ain't real. As you are accustomed. Soleo solere, not a subjunctive. So he's simply acknowledging that Sura's usual process is to argue both A and argue both B. But that's not what Pliny wants, as we just learned immediately thereafter. From one of the two, however, more strongly. So he doesn't want Sura to give a strong argument for A and a strong argument for B. He wants from one of the two sides, altera, from another side, be it A or be it B, more strongly make the argument, make the disputation. And he wants this purpose clause, so that not, or lest, you send me away, me, having been suspended and uncertain. And so, if Sura comes back and says, well, it could be A because of this, that, and the other, but it could be B because of this, that, and the other, then Pliny is in the same position he was at the very beginning of the letter. He wants Sura to weigh in one or the other. And to obviously give you a hint, he wants Sura to say that there is ghosts, because it then vindicates that third story, which was the one that he saw, did Pliny, as an omen concerning Domitian and how he was going to be on the hit list. Nevertheless. And so why? From one side of the two, ex altera, more strongly, lest you send me away having been suspended and uncertain. Since, and I think that's the best translation for cum, the cause has been, or since it, the letter that we are indeed reading, has been a perfect subjunctive. And what we have with a perfect subjunctive is a perfect stem, and then your perfect subjunctive endings. Erim, eris, erit, erimis, eritis, erit. Since it, the letter implied, has been the cause, the reason of consulting for me. The whole reason I'm writing you this letter is to give you these obvious evidential stories and let you then weigh in on it. Don't say, well, it could be A and it could be B. I want you to come out, does Pliny mean, and pick one or the other. There are ghosts, there are not ghosts. And indeed, so that I may desist, I may stop, and again, everything to the left is a present infinitive, everything to the right is an ending. I may stop to doubt, i.e. he wants there to be a confirmation from Sura, believing that there, yes, are ghosts. So, vale, bye. Now, to give a little bit of greater context here, under Domitian, when so many people of the senatorial ranks really truly suffered, they lost loved ones, they lost friends, being accused unfairly and thus indeed executed, Pliny, on the other hand, had done quite well. And so, after Domitian's death, people would look at Pliny kind of side-eyed and think, why did you do so well under Domitian? It must have been that you were a part of that corruption, you were a part of that evil. But if there can be confirmation via the ghost story that truly it was that Pliny had been potentially on the hit list, it might clear his reputation up a little bit. And why especially Sura, that he is writing to? Sura is a senator and a good friend of the current emperor Trajan. And so if Sura's opinion can be turned to think that truly Pliny had been potentially on that hit list, then it might turn the opinions of others who might be looking at Pliny side-eye because Pliny had done so well under that horrific monster of an emperor Domitian, if it were then plausible that the ghost story confirms that he had been on the hit list with that whole business, especially about the hair. But at any rate, keep studying and hopefully you'll do well.